Hey guys, Grumpy here with another episode of Ship Showcase, a series where we focus on unique, interesting, or powerful builds. In this episode, we're going to focus on my favorite ship in the game, which is the Aurora. Now, I know a lot of people thought the LP Brawler was my favorite ship because I piloted so much, but no, it is actually the Aurora. Um, I love this ship. It is fast, it is agile, it has DPS in droves, it has survivability. It is just a well-rounded is a serious understatement for the Aurora. In my opinion, it's one of the best ships in the game, excluding special ships, legendary ships, things like that. For just vanilla ships, it is by far one of the best ships in the game. So, what's so good about the Aurora? Why is it my favorite ship? Why do I like to pilot it? Or rather, why do I like to include it in my fleet? So, the Aurora has plasma jets, which is superior to burn drive, and it's also superior to its cousin, the Fury, which has plasma burn. Plasma jets gives you top speed, and it also gives you maneuverability, which is really good because you can move faster, but you're also more agile, so you can dodge missiles. You can close the distance between yourself in a phase ship or yourself in a carrier. You can use plasma jets to back away from your enemy or back away from the enemy very quickly. So it's offensive, it's defensive, and it's survivability. So it's a really good perk there. Better than plasma burn, which just shoots you forward, and burn drive, which also just shoots you forward. Maneuvering jets doesn't give you top speed; it just gives you more maneuverability. So you get all of that in one with plasma jets. Next up, the really nice thing about the Aurora is all of its armaments. Its armaments are insane, some of the best in the game. So first of all, on the front of the ship, just starting here, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hard points. Hard points are really good in this game because it just means that you can bear more. You can bring more weapons to bear against your opponent. So with 5 here, you have 5 weapons that you can face towards your opponent at all times. Most combat, like I mentioned in other episodes or other videos, is forward facing in Star Sector. It's you facing the enemy. Sometimes you get flanked, or sometimes you will be flanking, but usually it's 1v1. You're facing the opponent. So by having 5 hard points, that's a lot of firepower that you can face towards the enemy. The best thing about these hard points is that they are synergy slots, which allows you to split them between energy weapons and missiles. So with that being the case, they're just missile slots. That's how you should look at synergy slots. Energy weapons, besides the antimatter blaster, which we'll talk about in a second, for small and mediums, are kind of trash. Mediums especially. I think medium energy weapons really need to look at in the upcoming patch. They are some of the weakest weapons, class of weapons in the game. But anyway, the way you should look at synergy slots is basically missiles. On the Aurora, they offer you 5 missile slots right at the front. That's devastating. That's on par with a Griffin. Ironically, the Aurora is a better missile boat than the Griffin, which is a dedicated missile boat. But anyway, for this Aurora, for this version, I chose to put in Reapers. Reapers normally come with 1 limited ammo, so it's 1 and done. However, between expanded missile racks and the officer having missile specialization, you actually end up bringing 12 Reapers into the fight. 12 Reapers is overkill, to be honest. You really never need that many, even in long drawn out battles. So that's really good there. And then for the final synergy slot, we use that for a Sabopod. And if you look down here, we actually have 2 Sabopods. These are linked, so they fire together. The reason being is these fire 2 Sabos at a time, which is a combined amount of 4,000 kinetic damage, and then out of one, out of one of these. And then since you're firing two, that's actually 8,000 kinetic damage, which is usually more than enough to overload uh, any cruiser in the game. Um, Obviously, cruiser and smaller, and then it does a significant amount of kinetic damage to capital ships. So really powerful there. Moving on, we have our antimatter blasters. Like I mentioned before, or like I alluded to before, antimatter blasters just do a ton of damage. We are lucky in that we can use 3 of these. Sometimes I'll run 2 just so that I can use the extra ordnance points to fill out my vents and capacitors if I need to be extra tanky, which we'll talk about a little later on. These stats are incredible. But yeah, 1, 2, 3, it doesn't really make a difference. Well, I mean, it just depends how offensive you want to be versus defensive. But the antimatter blasters, they do 1400 damage, energy damage. They don't get any bonuses to shields or armor or anything like that, but they just do a flat 1400 damage. These are devastating on overloaded targets that can't block, or targets that have had their armor stripped away and you just punch their hole. Next up are the medium energies, heavy blaster and ion pulsar. I really like the ion pulsar. Just being able to spread the ion EMP damage across the enemy ship is really good. It just reduces their retaliatory fire and just makes your assault that much smoother. And then a heavy blaster for just consistent damage. 500 damage per shot. It's okay. It does add up. It does do a pretty significant amount of damage. Really good at chunking armor, actually. And that is it for armaments. So yeah, the Aurora just having that many synergy slots, which are really missile slots, combined with its access to antimatter blasters and medium blasters in conjunction with its flux stats just means that it has damage in droves. This thing is shred ships. So moving on from there, we have a very high top speed that's also in parts of safety overrides, which we'll talk about in a second. Its innate capacitors and vents are really high, just right out the box. If I remove this officer, you see that just vanilla stats, no vents, no capacitors, is enough to cover our shield and our weapon flux combined, and then we still have a decent pool of capacitors left. So really good there. Let's go ahead and put our officer back. Really positive there. Just go ahead and dump that. Its innate shields are really strong. We have hard shields built in. Also, this officer has elite field modulation. So we get to reduce that shield flux or damage all the way down to 0.5. So basically we get to double our flux capacity when it comes to damage. So instead of 16,000, we actually have closer to 30,000, which is on par with, I believe, a Paragon. So we can absorb, or 32,000. So we can absorb a ton of damage there. And then moving on to the hull mods, we have built-in expanded missile racks. Again, that's because we use Reapers. If you don't want to build in expanded missile racks, then I suggest using something like harpoons, which is still going to give you a lot of missiles, and then manually using, or not manually, but including expanded missile racks without building it in. You're still going to double your missile count, which is really nice, so you don't really have to worry about the limited ammo issues. From there, we also have hardened shields, which I talked about already. Shield convergent front just reduces our shield flux. Not really necessary. I tend to use shield convergent front on pretty much every ship because it reduces the shield flux and also increases the arc of your shield. Then we have safety overrides. Yes, it wouldn't be a grumpy build unless we included safety overrides somehow. Normally safety overrides isn't a good deal on a cruiser, but because we have so many ordnance points, 165, I think we can justify the safety overrides cost here. And for what it provides, double the flux dissipation, increase top speed. Yes, reduce range. However, we're using heavy blasters, which has a range of 600. and an ion pulsar which has a range of 500, so it's not really affected. Antimatter blasters have short ranges anyway at 400, and our missiles are unaffected by safety overrides. So it's just a win-win-win, and then its downside is completely mitigated. Yes, you do have peak performance time. Your peak performance time is reduced, but then again, you have 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes with Aurora is enough to destroy an entire fleet, to be honest. Just one Aurora. You can have multiple of these in your fleet. And then finally, I want to give a shout out to a commenter on my last video, Perjunka. He says, or they say, integrated point defense AI is not junk, so I had rated this whole mod D tier. There's an interesting synergy between integrated point defense AI and then elite point defense. Elite point defense reads extends the range of point defense weapons by 200. Well, what integrated point defense AI does is it gives all small non-missile weapons the ability to target your it basically converts all small non-missile weapons into point defense. What this means is the antimatter blasters, or really any of these small energy weapons or small weapons in general, get a plus 200 to their range. On this ship, we can't really do anything with it, but on something like a ballistic ship with these railguns, it stacks with ballistic rangefinder. So you can get ridiculous ranges on your small ballistic weapons. So just some food for thought. In this case, we're including it just because I want to demonstrate the extra range with the antimatter blasters. But yeah, that's some good tech that I didn't really realize. Going forward, I'm probably going to use it. I'm going to see how far or how ridiculous we can run with this. But it is an interesting idea. Again, that was Perjunka on the previous video that I released. So thank you for that. Anyway, enough talking about the Aurora. Let's just get into combat and demonstrate what is so good about it. So here we're going to show just the raw DPS going against a conquest. We're going to sit on the antimatter blasters for now. We have our sabos on auto fire, and then our ion pulsar and our heavy blaster also on auto fire. And basically what we're doing is we're going to work down the shields of the conquest. Once the shield is worked down, we'll hit it with the antimatter blasters. We'll hit it with the Reapers, just so we can punch a hole in the armor and do a significant amount of hull damage. And then we'll follow up with the antimatter blasters. Alright, we'll close the distance with the conquest. We're not scared at all of it. There you saw all of the sabos impact, and the conquest is almost fluxed out already. Next round, the conquest has to drop its shields. We'll take advantage of this and go ahead and fire our Reaper. Splashes on the shields. Alright. So we hit it with our second Reaper of 12. It's overloaded now, and there's damage to the front. So what we're going to do is with our antimatter blaster, just hit that. Open that up, and then finish it off with a Reaper. And no sweat. Just really easy fight. Showing off its maneuverability. Here we're using plasma jets defensively, so we're getting away from the onslaught. Then we're going to use it to close the distance. And it's on a very short cooldown. And finally, we're going to use the last one so that we can get behind the onslaught. Flame it out. And then go ahead and create a hole for our Reapers. And then follow up with antimatter blaster rounds. Another reason why I like the ion cannon is just because it disables some of that point defense. Just making sure our missiles and our basically we're not taking any retaliatory fire, just making it that much easier to get into combat. Against multiple ships, this thing is a beast as well. Gonna go ahead and break away. Dump all of our flux, and then go ahead and get back in the fight. Target down the Sunder. Yeah, these plasma jets just being on that short of a cooldown just means that we can choose where we want to fight, where we want to engage, how long we want to be in the fight. It allows us to do little drive-bys like this, and then sneak right back out. We do get flamed out here, but that's fine. We're far enough away from the enemy that it doesn't really make a difference. We can go ahead and drop our shields. One thing that this build suffers from that you can easily correct for is it doesn't have any point defense. Obviously, you can solve that if you decide to build point defense. Normally, I don't include point defense onto any of my builds because you can very easily pair this with a monitor. You can pair this with a monitor, which is going to screen for you and would be the one picking up these fighters. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. And see, plasma jets means that we can leave these enforcers in the dust. Yes, they do have burn drive, but they need to waste time turning in order to face us so that they can then burn drive towards us. Whereas we can plasma jets in any direction and really close that distance very quickly. And then we're even so nimble that we can do something like this, where even though these are two destroyers and normally we would be outclassed as far as maneuverability goes, we can tie the destroyers up and play Ring Around the Rosie. Use one as a shield against the other. So we've expended all of our Reapers, but that's fine. We still have our antimatter blasters, and honestly, between the just the steady damage of the heavy blaster and the ion cannon, it's enough just to plink away at an enemy. But anyway, that's the Aurora. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, I do have a very powerful officer in here, but one, I think this ship deserves a really good officer, or if you're going to pilot it, I would suggest investing in combat skills, so you're probably never going to run this ship just naked. But even if you do, a simple officer with missile specialization, um, target analysis, combat endurance, or ordnance expertise, or energy weapon mastery, any one of those is going to be enough to um, allow this ship to stand out. Um, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Other than that, Grumpy out. Give the Aurora a try. I strongly recommend it. All right, Grumpy out.
And now I'd like to give a very special thank you to our supporters at the Explorer tier, Randall Porter, Philip Kallenbach, and Mark, and at the Starfarer tier, Zoni, Wet Noodle, Kriltic, and our newest supporter, Wayfarer S tier. If you would like to support the channel, then becoming a member would be the best way to do so, but it is completely optional. I'll continue to run ad-free content on this channel, but if you do choose to support, it would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. Other than that, Grumpy out.